All right, everybody. Welcome to Houston Ensemble podcast number 11. Today we've got an amazing guest on the show. We're bringing on the wonderful, the great Dr. Will Tuttle. I've had the pleasure of knowing and having a relationship with Dr. Tuttle for the past 3-ish years, almost 4 years, because I got into his work early on in my rice career when I initially started my vegan journey. But Dr. Tuttle is an outspoken, over 40-year-long vegan activist, author, public speaker. He has a PhD from UC Berkeley. He's written amazing books. The book that I've read that has made a profound effect and is a #1 Amazon bestseller is The World Peace Diet: How Veganism Can Create World Peace. So Dr. Tuttle, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you being here and all the impact you've had on me.
Thank you. Thanks, Chad. Thanks, Armin. It's good to be with you. And thanks, everyone, for paying attention.
So, Dr. Tuttle, we've been friends on Facebook for, I think on a little bit after the Veg Fest. And for those who are not listening, or for those who don't know, who are listening, in 2018 and in 2019 at Rice University, I was vice president of the Rice Vegan Society. And the first year, me and one of my colleagues put together this festival to bring in speakers, to bring all sorts of food vendors from all over Houston, basically let people have a good time, experience vegan food, and educate those who would like to learn more. In 2019, I reached out to Dr. Tuttle because I had read The World Peace Diet, and I thought, wow, it would be amazing if he could come and speak. And we actually got him there. And again, I'm so grateful that you came to the Rice Veg Fest. That was so cool. And then I remember shortly after that, I actually ran into you at a vegan festival in Cincinnati, Ohio, my hometown. So that was serendipitous. But we're in a really interesting time period right now, and I resonate a lot with everything that Dr. Tuttle has been sharing on Facebook. And I did read your most recent essay regarding the Masquerade. I thought that was very important, and we'll get into that and we'll get into those topics. But I think I want to start off with you, Dr. Tuttle, and one, can you give us a little more background about yourself for those who are listening? And then two, just discuss why you think veganism is the way to go.
Great. Okay, so I'm not that different from anybody else. I was born in a typical family, eating the usual meals, lots of meat, dairy, and eggs. When I was a kid growing up, this is in New England, in Massachusetts, back in the 1950s. And but I gradually started to make the connection, and even though it's one of those things that's kind of hard to do for me, the most profound effect, I guess, really was when I left home right after college in the early it was 1975, and I decided, instead of just going into look for a job or get work, to take some time off and do a pilgrimage. Just take a walk across my brother, we thought we'd walk across the country. And I had started reading spiritual books on Zen, a lot of different things, yoga, different things back then. And I felt like it's important to find out who we are, that we're not just a body struggling here, competing with others to get the right job and money and wife, husband, that kind of stuff, but to actually go deeper than that. So we just walked and meditated, and we ended up heading south because it was cold, and it was in the autumn, and we walked all the way to Alabama. And on the way, we stopped at a community called The Farm in 1975, which was at that point the largest hippie commune in the world. And they were all vegetarians. They said, we're vegetarians. They were actually vegans, but no one heard of the word vegan in 1975, so you couldn't even use it. But they didn't eat meat or dairy or eggs, and they really did it for ethical reasons, because of the huge amount of food that's wasted when we feed all this grain to animals while people are going hungry. And they were trying to make a world of more peace and harmony. And they said, if we eat lower on the food chain, there'll be enough food for everyone. We won't have food shortages. And food shortages lead to conflict and war and all kinds of suffering. And then the other thing they mentioned to me was about the animals and how they're imprisoned and horribly abused and mutilated and killed before we eat them. And so I had made those connections a little bit, but that made me just really stop and think about it. So at that point, I became a vegetarian, and that was 45 years ago. And about 5 years later, I became a vegan, when I made the connection a little deeper about dairy and the terrible suffering that cows go through for dairy products, and also chickens for eggs. And I always say I'm so grateful for that community and that I was able to move in that direction. And it really went well with everything. I always say the smartest thing I ever did, besides marrying my wonderful wife, Madeline, was going vegan, because it creates a foundation, really, I think, and at least I found that in my life, for peace and harmony and health, joy, creativity, abundance. It's really, I think, essential for us as individuals to realize that if we harm other beings, especially those who are innocent and vulnerable, who didn't do anything against us, if we just harm them, just abuse them for our own benefit unnecessarily, we're sowing seeds of misery for them and for us. And those seeds always come back. I dove deeply after that into religion, spirituality, and meditation. I did lots of long meditation retreats, week-long, 2-week-long, 4-week-long, 8-week-long, 16-week-long, month-long, many months long. I did a 3-month-long silent retreat in Korea. I became a Zen monk eventually in Korea. So I did thousands and thousands of hours of meditation, just sitting and contemplating the source of what I am, and realizing that my whole consciousness had been colonized by the culture that I'd been born into, and that it was not a very healthy mentality that was living inside of me, that had been injected into me by my society. And the main problem is animal agriculture. That's what I realized. This whole activity of imprisoning billions of animals and mutilating them, impregnating them against their will, stealing their lives, stealing their children, stealing everything, and doing it over and over again. And as I say, it's completely unnecessary. There's no nutrient that we need to be healthy that we have to do this to all these poor animals. And it's devastating to the workers who have to stab animals, to the hungry people, to indigenous people who have their habitats destroyed, to environments, to oceans, to rainforests, and to our own health. I mean, all the saturated fat, cholesterol, acidifying and inflammatory animal protein that we're eating is harmful to us. And it clogs up our brain and thinking, I think, to quite a degree. It dumbs us down, unfortunately, quite a bit. We have to basically learn not to make connections. I don't want to, if I say to someone, would you like to know where your bacon comes from? Very often they'll say, no, don't tell me. I don't want to know. I want to enjoy my bacon. So that basic mentality of not wanting to know makes it very easy for us to be manipulated and to be abused ourselves, because we're abusing others and we don't want to really admit that or face up to it, or to understand the consequences of our daily actions. And so we sow these seeds of violence and they come boomeranging back on us. So that's really one of the main messages in the World Peace Diet. It's a very positive message, and the message is we can definitely create a world of harmony and peace and abundance on this beautiful earth. But the thing is, if we're going to imprison and kill animals, it's never going to happen, because these beings yearn for freedom and peace and to fulfill their destinies just like we do. And if we don't let them do it, we're not going to be allowed to do it. And so I think that's the really the acid test we're all facing right now of how we live our lives. And if we allow these cows and pigs and chickens and turkeys and ducks and geese and fishes and all these beings who we are abusing and killing, let them live their lives, then we'll be worthy ourselves. and we'll be able to create a world where peace and justice and freedom are actually possible. So it's not about blaming or criticizing anyone. It's really about understanding our cultural program. So that's the really the main message that I'm still like a voice. I feel like a voice in the wilderness many times, but just trying to get out there to people to realize that our treatment of animals has huge consequences.
And I think all three of us know already, or we're very aware of that. Sickness is a profitable business, and the world governments, but especially the United States, is so steeped in that, and they need to continue it for profit. And if you just look inside or on the ingredients on some things, or even what's injected into meats or what's done to meats, whether it's UV light destroying the B12 in the meat, or the hormones or the pesticides or all this stuff, they're profiting off of that. Or even fluoride in the water. I was reading a great book a while ago called The Case Against Fluoride. I'd been aware of it before, but calcifying, they've shown that fluoride calcifies our pineal gland.
Right.
And our pineal gland, I think us three agree on this because I know we all have very, very similar views, is part of our spirituality and part of our expansive consciousness. Yeah. And that makes me worried. And then somebody will look at us and be like, well, you guys just sound paranoid. And I'll be like, I don't think so. I think if you take a hard look at what we're talking about, you will realize what I'm saying.
Can I just interject with a thought? As I'm listening to you guys, I just want to mention, and then I have a question if you don't mind. So my two little personal obsessions for personal growth is, and this is the nerd side of me, I like evolutionary biology, and then I also like spirituality, like the ways in which spirituality is echoing in the modern culture. We're seeing a return to the natural. We're seeing a longing for the natural in some groups. Mm-hmm. And I think there's little pockets of like explosions where people are getting into this like we were in the 60s and 70s. So I really am into that, but I also try to see the evolutionary biology side of it. And this is what I mean by that. So my question is, do you see any scenario in which it's justified for people? First of all, let me clear. It's never justified. I was born on a farm, and I've witnessed the slaughter of animals, and I've seen it all. Just the traditional farm, nothing fancy, no factories, none of that.
Not in the United States.
And not in the United States, in Georgia, overseas, and Armenia. So I'll just tell you right now, if you go to if those people sometimes, and some of them are impoverished, relatively speaking, they're not living in modern conditions. They can't go to the store. There's no going to the store, really. Mm-hmm. Is there any scenario in which the killing of an animal is justified for you? I
was going to ask that.
And that's one question. And, how do you respond to a culture of people that have been for thousands of years raising their livestock, doing it all, respecting the animals, but still, using them for nourishment and for clothing, etc.
And let me just build on that really briefly, because I was going to ask a very similar question. Is there also a world that could exist in which the using of animal products was almost at a utopia, like it was minimal and natural, anything like that? That's all I want to add.
Okay, well, those are very good questions, and I'm glad you brought up in the beginning, Chad, just the idea that disease is very profitable, and so we have a whole system that's, as I say in the World Peace Diet, for 10,000 years we've been doing what you're talking about, owning animals like people do, like you say in Georgia or Armenia, right, in small farms, and we still all over the world. people started owning animals as property for food, herding them. That's kind of a relatively new thing. It's only goes back 10,000 years to what is today Iraq. Before that, there was hunting of them, but there wasn't this like ownership. This is, I own these animals. These are mine.
Right.
Important.
But that's, it's been passed down through the generations. It's been normalized. It's been rationalized, and we feel like we have to do it, right? To get protein, to get food, to eat enough, to get enough to eat. Yeah. So I think I don't know what happened 10,000 years ago to kind of kick this whole thing off. There's different anthropologists argue about it. Some say there was problems with huge climatic changes that forced people into new behaviors of some kind. Some people say, people from other planets came here and taught us how to do it or something. There's all kinds of different theories, but for some reason it started, and it's going, and it's very much a Trojan horse. It's very appealing in a sense. Like, you can feed these animals, and you can breed them, and then you can kill them, you can eat them, you can take their milk, their eggs, their wealth, you can sell them. But it unfortunately brings out the worst in us, because we have to enslave these animals, and even if we say we respect them, it's not really respect. I mean, you're going to cut their throat. So it's a certain type of utilitarian use that they're reduced to being commodities, and they are bought and they are sold, and they are killed when we want to kill them, and we do steal their sovereignty. So the basic idea is that the most precious thing to any living being is their sovereignty. And I've seen this. Like, we have a garden here in Northern California where we grow lots of food. We have about 65 fruit and nut trees, and lots of veggies and herbs and berries and things. And in the beginning, we put a fence around that was very heavy duty plastic, 8-foot fence to keep the deer out. And it was great. It worked. They never came in. It was perfect. But then one day a deer got in somehow by mistake through one of the gates, I guess. And within about half an hour, she had destroyed the fence. She just got out of there. She broke it down, tore it apart. And it was such a vivid example to me of how precious freedom is to living beings. So we've lost that. We in a sense, we're ourselves born into a certain type of slavery, and so we've lost touch with how precious freedom really is, I think. And so I've talked to people all the time. They say, well, I have my own chickens and I treat them well, and they give me eggs and I give them food, and there's no cruelty. They're happy. Only a slave would say that. Only a slave could not see that this being is lived for millions of years in the jungles of Southeast Asia, and she's used to living in the jungles of Southeast Asia, and with males around. There's no males. It's just a few females giving eggs. There's no way to naturally. She has no sovereignty. She's dependent on me for food, and it's so interesting how we don't see the terrible deeds that we're doing, right, to these animals. And when we've violently taken them out of their natural habitat, and we put them inside of a cage, basically a yard, a fence of some kind, and force them to live their whole life there until we kill them. It's premeditated murder. And then we rationalize it to our children. We teach them how to do it. We teach them how to kill. I did it. I cut chickens' heads off myself. I've done it, and I've killed cows on dairies. So I've been indoctrinated the whole thing. I know. But the thing is, we have to realize that there are other ways of living, and that we can get all the nutrients that we need to be healthy from plant-based sources, and that it's as soon as we go down this road of imprisoning animals and justifying it and rationalizing it, we're gonna be under oppressive rulers ourselves. We're going to find that our own freedom is taken. We're going to find sexual abuse of our men and women. We're doing that to these animals, and they don't like it. They don't want it, but we're violent.
Yeah,
it's massive violence, and we're eating the violence. We're teaching violence to our children. So, the thing we have to understand is that we can live from plant-based foods, and people have been learning how to do. People have been able to do that. I think, I used to teach college courses in comparative mythology, and it's really interesting to see that around the world there's what Joseph Campbell called a monomyth, like this basic myth. It's very similar. And one of the primary characteristics of myths worldwide is that long, long ago, there was a time, a golden age, or a garden, a time when we lived in harmony with each other, with animals, with the universe, with God, or the gods, whatever it was. But then something happened. There was a fall. There was the devil came in, or something came in. There was something bad happened, and now we're in this sort of difficult time. And that, I think, that's an ancient memory. I think there was a time, personally, it's hard to know for sure, but from the research I've done, when animals were not so afraid of us. They're really afraid of us now, and I would be too if I was an animal, because we're either killing them or imprisoning them. We lord it over all the other animals, like we matter and they don't matter. And this goes generation to generation, and it's a very powerful program that I think is toxic fundamentally. And so I think at this time we're called to just get creative and figure out other ways of eating and living, because it's just too easy to kill animals. They don't have any people standing up for them and saying, stop it, If they were killing and eating humans, hopefully people would say, no, don't do that, But since it's cows and pigs and chickens, people say, oh, that's okay, they're just cows, pigs, and chickens. And so that learning to just reduce a being because she's from another species, that reductionism is a very harmful, obviously to them, but to us too. We go from there into all kinds of social injustice kinds of scenarios, because we're practicing every day eating privilege and elitism and domination and exploitation of the weak by the strong. I mean, that's what we're eating. That's what we're engaging in. War is right around the corner. Wealthy elites dominating the less wealthy right around. It's going to happen. You're going to have all of that. If you want to have animal agriculture, go ahead. But it's going to lead to what we have right now. And when you have nuclear weapons, and when you have this kind of massive technology for massive global surveillance, we survey our cows and pigs and chickens, even those little farms in Georgia, and we watch them. We know where they are. Same thing's going to happen to us. We're going to be watched everywhere we are. We're going to become the livestock. We are becoming the livestock. We've been doing this long enough that it's unfolding, and we've seen it happen over and over again. So I just think it's essential to realize we can't go there. Just like it's so easy because that's what everybody does, just to rationalize it somehow. But we have to harden our hearts to do it, right? I mean, we have to just be willing to kill this being that I become friend, that depends on me, that looks up to me with eyes of trust. I'm feeding her, and then I turn around and I cut her throat. I mean, that right there, no matter how you cut it, it's like this planet, I don't think, is a hell realm where we have to live like that. We've turned it into that. But it's time for us to just say no to that. It's not an option. And the world spiritual traditions emphasize that, I think. And so it's really important for me to just investigate this, and again, not blame anyone, just say that these are the kinds of social narratives that have come down through the generations, and we're so steeped in it ourselves. We're so just marinated in these narratives that it's hard to separate out our own true nature from the narratives, because the narratives kind of take over consciousness, and we identify with them ourselves, and with our memories, and with our parents and teachers and friends, and all of that. It's very deep. So these are great questions. I mean, these are going right to the very core of the dilemma that we're having, I think, really.
I might forget this thought. Chad, don't forget your thought. But I have this quick thought. And when I say it, please don't feel like I'm being facetious. It's just an analogy that I want to express and see what you think. You've probably heard this analogy. But, the way I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that you think that human beings have the option of being vegan, right? You think that we all have the option of being vegan. So therefore, And full disclosure, I was a vegetarian for many years myself. So I'm not new. I'm not coming out of this completely new, but that's besides the point. Okay, so every human being has the option. So did we always have the option to be vegan? Since our ape-like form or whatever, did we always have that option? That's the first question I want to ask.
That's a good question.
And what differentiates human beings? Look, I know human beings get really intense when they get obsessive. The obsessive power of human beings, the desire to grow. There's something inside our genetics, in our evolutionary feeling is like we always are trying to make it bigger, better, spreading, etc., etc. So yeah, the meat industry has become ridiculous, but I question, or I ponder whether it's necessarily unnatural for us to be doing things. It's messed up, but I guess what I'm asking is there a similarity between how a lion will catch a gazelle, eat it from the behind as it's still living, trying to get away? When I see that image and I see that lion doing that, I don't judge that lion for doing that. And I'm not saying human beings are like lions. That is obviously not the case. We've got so much more utility. We got a bigger brain. We have more resources. We do have the
different physiology. Most importantly,
different physiology as well. And so the point is, what really is. Again, I don't want to. I understand we're all very passionate about this, and I don't want to offend anybody. But we got to ask the question is like, what really is the difference between that lion and what he's doing to that animal and the really egregious and like upscaled version of what we're doing, which is terrible. But like, I feel like there is still some similarity there. What do you feel about what I'm saying right now?
Well, those are typical questions that people ask when they start thinking about this. And you're right. I mean, I've given over 4,000 lectures in 50 countries in all 50 states, and I've heard every possible question at least, it seems like 50 times.
Yeah.
And it's a good one. It's a good, and to try to go back to the past, like whatever happened, it's always, and how did we evolve? And there's different ways you can look at it. I mean, basically, anthropologists agree that when you go back, like to Australopithecus, going back about 2 million years, you have a total plant-based eater. I mean, there's no question about that. That's our earliest hominid ancestor that, as far as they know, from the dentition and everything else, they know they only ate plants. So that's basically it. And then you find different, there's a lot of argument among anthropologists about how the whole family tree developed into humans and who ate what. And I remember when I wrote the World Peace Diet, the anthropologists were arguing that Neanderthals died out because they ate too much meat. They were eating so much meat, and now they're saying no. Neanderthals were basically vegetarians; they didn't eat any meat, and that's in just 10. That's like 15 years. They've changed their mind. I mean, they're always changing their mind. Like who did what, when, and how, and all that. Because we don't even know what happened on 9/11. That was only like 20 years ago. What happened 20,000 years ago? Who knows? Or a million years ago. You have official stories. Basically, you have official stories that fit the narrative, and then people tell them to justify what they're doing now. And it's very difficult to get out of that because our whole educational system is based, again, I like that word, marinating. We marinate in an educational system with narratives that support the status quo. That's what it does. And the whole thing is about supporting the status quo. You've got this massive, I call it the military, industrial, meat, medical, pharmaceutical, media, banking complex. Don't think that the educational system is not going to support, make sure that everyone is a cog in that machine and has a narrative in their own head that allows them to stab and kill animals without thinking about it and get sick and everything else and go to war and do all that. That's why we're raised in this society to do that. And so we'll talk about, in the past, of course, it's natural. Everybody did it. We don't know that. I mean, there's a lot of evidence, really, like I said earlier, that the monomyth that people lived in harmony and they didn't make any history. They didn't have wars. They didn't eat animal foods. They were total plant-based eaters. And there's no reason physiologically for us not to be. But what we're eating now, we're not typically attacking an animal with our bare teeth. We don't jump onto a gazelle with our bare teeth and bite into her. And
Right.
we don't have claws. We don't have teeth. We don't have a bloodlust. We're totally different from lions and tigers and those animals that have a taste for that. We don't, I mean, I can go on and on, but we do not have the physiology of a carnivore at all. We have a completely opposite physiology and psychology. So, when we eat saturated fat and cholesterol, it just clogs us up. For them, it doesn't clog them up at all, and of course, dairy products, I don't have to talk about that, but we're definitely, that's even the worst thing for our health. And yet we're eating these things and we learn to crave them. And when we crave something, very often it's because it's toxic, right? People's cigarettes, alcohol, these things, we develop an addiction because it's toxic. And so our body has to go through all kinds of hoops, and then it starts craving it. And there's a lot of evidence that there are substances in these foods that are causing physical addictions and definitely social and psychological addictions. So I think we have to kind of step back and just realize that the animals do all kinds of things, right? I mean, animals do they eat, you see some animals quite often, it's very common for males to eat their own babies, and you don't see some guy saying, well, sorry, honey, I ate the baby, because, animals do it. So I thought, we should do it too.
But,
they do all kinds of things.
Regarding that,
why do we go in certain things and we say, we're going to copy that because we saw an animal do it, so we're going to do it. We have to, I think, realize that we ourselves as individuals have an obligation to just, for this short time we're on this earth, to live our life as authentically as we can. And to me, that means not just being a robot, not just going along with a cultural program and just doing what everybody tells me I have to do and then dying. I mean, I'm not helping the evolution. We're talking about evolution. I'm not helping my society to evolve in a positive direction if I'm not questioning the underlying narrative. And to me, the animal agriculture narrative is the narrative. I mean, that's the one that gets everyone, that gets its claws into everyone. And that's why it's the hardest. We have all these justifications. People say, well, plants have feelings too, or if we didn't eat the cows, they'd take over the world, or, there's different things. But basically, none of these really hold water, ultimately. We don't need to, and we can figure out other ways of living, I think. And the other thing is, when we look at the past, this is just another point I just like to make, and I talk about this in the World Peace Diet. There's a story by the Buddha, about the Buddha, where he says, it's not a good idea if you're wounded by an arrow to ask all these questions, right? I mean, if you're wounded by an arrow and you have a serious wound, you better take the arrow out. But if you say, no, I'm not going to take the arrow out. I'm not going to take it out until I know the history, like who shot the arrow and where they were standing when they shot the arrow and who their father was and what kind of feathers they used. We can argue and think about this for a long time, but we can very clearly see the same situation applies to us right now. Whatever people did in the past, right now, for us as human beings on this earth to be imprisoning and killing animals and growing huge amounts of corn and soy and alfalfa and feeding to these imprisoned animals and eating them and getting all the diseases and all the war and conflict, it's not a good idea. Whatever the history was, whatever people thought they had to do it in the past, whatever, we do not need to do it now. It's totally counterproductive to our welfare. It's totally productive to the welfare of the large pharmaceutical corporation executives and large petroleum companies and large financial institutions. But for us, the people, it's not a good idea. I mean, you can see it's just devastating to our health on every level. If we look deeply, we can see that, I think. And that's another great question, actually.
I wanted to go off. I've got quite a few things that are here, but and then I'm going to steer us somewhere because there's a point that we're getting very close to, and I know you have a lot of words on it. Regarding the eating of the babies, we're not eating babies today, but we're killing a lot of babies today, and that to me seems analogous. For example, and I'm not 100% sure on the statistic. I'm just going to say Kanye West said it on the Joe Rogan podcast. For example, 1,000 black babies are aborted every day. And I think 28% of children are aborted. 28% of births, or 23%, something like that, anywhere 23 to 28, are aborted. And of course, for those who are listening, this is very nuanced. I don't even want to get into it totally, but that reminds me of what you were saying regarding fathers eating babies or just killing babies in general. Two, I think regarding what happened in our past, maybe that was the natural way for us, or at some point the general human consensus was that it was natural to eat animals. But I think the whole point of being a human is evolving further and further and growing our consciousness further and further. And I remember reading a book on meditation when I was studying abroad, and I was meditating a lot. And he said, you have to be, and I hate haves and, ultimatums, but he said, you should be / have to be vegetarian, or at least not consume meat on this path, because as you consume the meat, and like you said earlier, you're consuming the negative vibration that went into the procuring of the meat, whether it's the shooting in the head of the pig as it gets on the belt and then the slaughter, or the cow being ripped by its foot up into the air and then slaughtered, or just the negative energy in the workers that's in there. I mean, it's horrible. It's scary. It's dangerous. If you ever watch videos on it, terrible. And, I read Peter Singer's Animal Liberation. I found that in a thrift store very, synchronistically one time. I read it, basically cried throughout the entire book. And I actually remember writing you an email, I think shortly after I read The World Peace Diet. And I was like, wow, I'm actually anxious right now, and I'm not sure how to deal with it. And I have dealt with it since then, because thinking about that, all those things, and just going so deep on it, and it caused me a deep fear and just unrest. And I see that manifesting in our culture with the violence and becoming desensitized to everything of this nature. And then also, and I'm going to steer us into it now, the blind following of the status quo narrative, and the retribution that I get or anybody else gets when you question the narrative, or you point something out, or you say, hey, look, they lied. Let's get into it right now. Anthony Fauci lied to us in an interview, in anywhere February, March, something like that. He said, do not wear a mask. A mask in this pandemic will do nothing for you. Straight up, those were his words. Go watch the interview. Later on, he rescinded that statement. He said, I only said that because we wanted to save masks for the healthcare workers because we were running low. So go put on a bandana. It'll help. No, you lied. You outright lied to us. If you had said, hey, everybody, I'm not sure what the mask will do. There's no literature on it in the official medical journals until March of this year. There was no significant literature on the effectiveness of wearing masks and preventing viral infections up until March of this year, ironically, when they needed it. And if he had said, we need you to be careful, not buy so many masks because we need healthcare workers to have masks, I would have said, wow, okay, yeah, fine. And I was one of the first people wearing masks on an airplane when I was traveling, because I didn't know and I hadn't looked into it. But since then, I've gotten really deep into it, and I've been looking at everything. Even the U.S. Surgeon General, Jerome, whatever his last name is, made a giant Twitter post. I have the screenshot on my computer, all caps, stop buying masks. It's not going to help you. I think that was February 29th. It's not going to help you. It's not going to keep you from getting sick. And then you want to tell me that he's just changing his opinion? No. Mm-hmm. No. So I know you have a lot of thoughts on this. I would love, and I know this is a long talk and we don't have a ton of time, but if you could tell me the meat, not the meat. The potatoes and the other veggies, tell me that. And the sauce.
Yeah, well, yeah, you guys are asking really good questions. And I think the whole idea, and I've written a recent essay, The Masquerades That Define Our Culture.
We'll link
Basically, the idea is that, again, we have these institutions in our society that portray themselves as being benevolent when they're actually malevolent. And I think we have to come to terms with that. And it's not, it's not being paranoid. It's just looking with clear eyes. And the main one we've been talking about, animal agriculture. Animal agriculture is portrayed to us. By the time I was a little kid, it's, wow, have a burger, have a hot dog, have some cheese. It's going to give you lots of protein, give you lots of calcium, build up big and strong and really wonderful thing. It's portrayed as something really wonderful and benevolent, but it's actually malevolent. If we were cows and pigs, we'd understand it's malevolent. Now we understand for humans, it's destroying our ecosystems, it's destroying our physical health, our psychological health, our cultural health. On every level, animal agriculture is harming us terribly, and it's devastating. And we have another one I talk about in the article, the chemical hoax, basically. The idea that all these chemicals are great. With these chemicals, we can grow more food, we can get rid of all those bugs and get rid of all the pests, and we can extend the shelf life, and we can put it in the water, and we can put it in the food, and we can stop put it into clothes for retarding flames. And these are all incredibly toxic chemicals that are causing cancer and birth defects and nerve diseases and so forth. And we're swimming in chemicals now, and we find cancer rates going through the roof. And another one I talk about is the financial institution. I won't get into that, but just the whole idea of the Federal Reserve and banks and the way they create money and build wealth to the point where a tiny wealthy elite class basically has so much wealth that they can take away houses and businesses from the people quite easily. And we see that happening in this whole pandemic. It's a massive transfer of wealth. By closing down businesses, it's just shifting wealth. People can't, pay they're losing their houses. They're all being bought up by banks, taken, repossessed. So this is the greatest transfer of wealth from the lower and middle classes to the super elite of all time. And so we have these the defense industry, the war on terror, all these things, the media. We're giving you the news. It's a bunch of lies they're giving us. It's not news. And the war on terror is basically just creating more insecurity and violence in the world. It's not creating security. So it's important to have clear eyes and look beyond the surface, look beyond the mask. Look, they put this mask up, right, to deceive us, this mask of benevolence, a smiley face. And to me, it's the greatest coup in many ways that this whole system of mask-wearing institutions that are parasitic, they're sucking finances and energy from the people and enriching themselves and enslaving the people. And now they've got us wearing masks. So we can't see each other. We can't speak up. We have something covering our mouth. We're muzzled. And people are going along with it. I guess that's the most disturbing thing to me is the enthusiasm with which people run into the cage and let them lock it up and just be happily in the cage. But I've understood this for decades. I mean, I've been talking about this for decades. I've been warning people about this for decades. I've said for decades, I've been saying, if you're going to microchip and track animals by the millions, you're going to end up getting microchipped and tracked. Because as you sow, somehow or other, it's going to happen. And so now we have the excuse for the whole thing to happen. And I remember even before, I used to teach a college course in a college in San Francisco on freedom and control, basically, was the title of it. And it was, and Eric Fromm, who was a famous social psychologist, talked about the authoritarian personality, which is cultivated really within a herding culture, which is a person who craves to dominate, right? And so if we're eating animal foods, we're dominating animals in nature. But he says anyone who craves to dominate also craves to be dominated. You can't have one without the other.
Wow.
They're both a form of sickness. And anyone who's craving to dominate others is going to also crave to be dominated. And that's the authoritarian personality, which is basically engendered in an animal agriculture society where you're dominating and exploiting others. So you have these hierarchies of power. And people, the time we're little kids, we're born into this system and we're eating animal foods where we learn to dominate, we learn to be dominated, and we learn to want that, to be comfortable with that. And so we see that we just want to have authorities tell us what to do. And then we become the authorities ourselves and we tell other people what to do. And there's this great fear of freedom, actually. And I think the whole idea for us as individuals is to do some self-inquiry and to really take time to meditate and to look deeply within and to quiet our mind and connect with the inner light of internal consciousness that is shining like the sun all the time, and realize that what we are was never born and will never die. What we are is eternal consciousness. We're experiencing or expressing through this, I'm waving at you, this physical body. That's not us. We're not matter. We're not physical matter. We are what makes this matter come alive. Same thing with cows and pigs and chickens and all beings. So when we see that in a cow or pig or chicken, we're not going to stab her anymore. It's only people who have lost touch with that stab animals and eat animals. Once you wake up and realize consciousness is eternal and beautiful, and love, it's just love and freedom and joy and creativity, and this is our purpose, to express that. Then animal agriculture and imprisoning and raping animals and eating that becomes absolutely, you see it for the hideous thing that it really is. Until we connect with authentic spirituality, though, we're lost in the maze. And this whole COVID thing, it's just obvious. It's just only people who are lost in the maze are going to be trapped by that. But it's a big net, and it's over the whole world, and it's pulling people obviously towards a mandatory vaccination, which is that's the game, and tracking, microchip tracking, and these these new generation injections. They can put all kinds of stuff in there to track where people are and who knows what else. So it's important for us, I think, to question this, to refuse to go along with it, to absolutely live our own lives freely, because if we are many and they are few. And so I think it's important for us, otherwise it's very easy for the few to dominate many, like we do it. We have one or two people can control a whole herd of cows or sheep or goats or chickens or whatever, through technology and just through having more awareness. And so if we lose our awareness, which is what's unfortunately happened living in an animal agriculture society, we're becoming like livestock, unfortunately. We're very easily controllable by just a few. So it's time to open our eyes, take the blinders off, and stop eating animal foods. That's the most important thing. Then we'll be sowing seeds of liberation. If we keep eating animal foods, we're going to be in prison. We're going to become livestock ourselves. There's no way we won't be. I mean, that's the universal principle. If there's one universal principle of truth, it's this: what you sow will come back. What goes around comes around. And so we're called now more than ever to go vegan and understand why, and to question the domination and exploitation of other beings, so that we're not also exploited ourselves, essentially.
And for those who are listening that aren't vegan, if you actually are sincerely worried about catching COVID-19, you may as well make a change to your diet and go on the lowest inflammatory diet, which is the plant-based diet, to up your immune system, or add some protection. And you don't see that too. All you see is people being like, you know what, I'm gonna squirt a bottle of hand sanitizer on my hands, I'm gonna slap on a bandana, I'll meet you at McDonald's later.
I know, it's really amazing. I mean, the government officials could be telling everybody to get fresh air and sunshine, which kill viruses if they're so bad, to eat a healthy diet and to think positive thoughts and be happy. But fear and in a lack of sunshine and fresh air and unhealthy food, I mean, you're guaranteed to make people very sick. And of course, there's all kinds of hoaxes going on with accounting, with cases and counting, and it's a joke. I mean, the PCR test is well known. It's completely easily manipulated. Yep. You just run more amplifications and you have more positives. So you have like 30 amplifications, you have like basically nobody will test positive. You go up to 35, now you get quite a few. You go up to 40, everybody will test positive. You can create as many cases as you want. It's very easy. And they're running around 38 to 40 on their amplification. So they're getting lots of false positives to get everybody locked down and wearing masks. I mean, the whole idea is, why do we believe the media, which has been totally bought and captured by the big pharma and by the big banks? I mean, why would we believe them?
That's
I mean, that's
that's
like,
what I say to my
so it just shows that people have lost touch, unfortunately, with their own inner wisdom and with their ability to think critically and to really be rational, unfortunately. And this fear, I mean, I've traveled all over the world, cultures all, I've hugged thousands of people. I never got sick. I mean, all over India, Africa, China, Asia, wherever, it's, if you have a healthy immune system, then your viruses are my friends, bacteria are my friends. I'm not afraid of them at all. We're living among trillions upon trillions. There's trillions of bacteria living inside of us. There's trillions of viruses living inside of us. If they died and left us, we would die right away. I mean, they're helping us. They're our helpers. They're not anything to be afraid of. We are being lied to on every possible level for our own imprisonment. And if we don't wake up and understand that, it's really our own fault in a certain sense. I mean, we've been wounded. Our intelligence has been shut down in the educational system. I understand that. But at a certain point, we have to take responsibility for our own life and do something, question things. We have to, I think. Otherwise, we just pass on more ignorance and create greater enslavement for everyone. I think we're kind of at the closing time
right?
here.
Mm-hmm. That's what I was about to say. Man, we could really
I think,
keep going, but we can't.
No, I think what, would be amazing. I know you're so busy and you're doing God's work, and you're God. We're all God. So if you ever want to come back on and discuss more, that would be so cool. This is one thing we're trying to do with this podcast: freedom of thought, lack of censorship, outspoken ideas. We're going to tag. We're gonna put your information in the description. We're gonna put that article in the description. I want everybody to read that. I want everybody to read the World Peace Diet. The message from this podcast is: invest in yourself, inquire within yourself, go deep within yourself, and really think about what's going on in the world. But with that, Dr. Tuttle, thank you so much for joining us today. I am truly grateful. I'm grateful for your contribution to Rice Veg Fest, to my personal emotional state, to my vegan path, etc. Thank you. Hope to see you in person eventually.
Yes, sir, and it's been a pleasure. You've been a lot of fun to talk to, and I admire your enthusiasm and your knowledge, and thank you.
Okay, well, much love to both of you. Thanks again. Thanks, Chad, for having me on, and maybe we can do another one.
That'd be awesome. Sweet. All right, we'll see you, Dr. Tuttle.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
I'm going to end this.
You're going to end the thing. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, aliens, microbial
we could talk
species.
We could talk for a second.
Yeah, I mean, the other question was, it's hard for me to ask these questions because, I know how it makes me sound, but I want people to understand that when I ask a question, I ask it pretty much knowing multiple responses that could happen. Mm-hmm. And I'm really asking questions more so to steer a conversation rather than necessarily express what I truly feel.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
So I was going to ask something like this. So presumably, according to our archaeological findings, we find that early man developed weapons. Mm-hmm. Spears and dagger-like objects of the sort. Mm-hmm. The question is, why did we do that? What part did that have in our evolution? Mm-hmm. Because you could make the argument that we made it to a certain moral but really a technological level because of our desire to create these tools and eventually hunt with these tools and eventually make shelters with these tools. And a lot of that had to do with hunting. And I know that, and listen, I am the first one to say that, yes, it is our responsibility. If we claim to be so much better than animals, so much more intelligent, so great, then it's our responsibility to actually demonstrate that we have a moral intelligence.
Right.
So it's our responsibility to not just do things because, we're all like animals. No, I thought you said we're not like animals, right? So you got to do better. But we can't glaze over. I don't. I like the way when Tuttle said, and I respect it. On one hand, I'm tempted to agree, but on the other hand, I'm not so sure. When we say it doesn't really matter what we did, the now matters. I agree, the now does matter. But why did human beings develop weapons? And the second thing is, what does the utopian world look like? What does the garden look like? Does it look like lions and cheetahs and gazelles and rats and insects are just like hanging out having drinks?
Or like in the background, the lions like killing a bunch of animals. But I feel like.
Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, 100%.
And we're just peaceful humans.
And I feel like for me, as the vegan side of this, I understand all that.
Yeah.
And I feel like those are really important questions. And I don't necessarily think like from the get-go, humans were made to be vegan. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And by the way, we're never gonna know.
Yeah.
What I do think is important, I was thinking earlier I wanted to say this, but I couldn't get it in. A good clip, funny name for a clip would be, "Were Adam and Eve vegan?"
Yeah, that's
But it
that's
actually
funny.
did make me think that. I was like, oh, I guess maybe Adam and Eve were vegan.
Yeah.
But I feel like, okay, we are animals. We have the same tendencies. We see it all the time, and everybody wants to deny it. It's weird. There's so much like cognitive dissonance always, because we deny that we're like animals. We act like animals.
But we think we're better.
Then we're better. Then we justify it. Then we make excuses. And then we make caveats for other things. And nothing's uniform. But one thing that I do think is like which I think most people would agree on, we're always in a state of moving forward or elevating our consciousness, getting better.
And I think paradigms shift as we're approaching different levels. So maybe eating meat and hunting did serve us to a point, and now it doesn't.
And it's like maybe now we're seeing, because we have the technology, like it's like we didn't really have technology or resources, and maybe now that we have our excess resources and excess technology, and we've grown spiritually, even with, for example, like psychedelics are recent to an extent. Not all of them, but like acid, DMT, recent. It's growing the whole nature of our spirituality. Maybe veganism is a part of a next step, or a plant-based diet, because we're understanding the consuming of energy. Or maybe back in the day when they were killing the animals, they weren't really consuming negative, evil energy. I mean, there's an intenseness that goes with killing the animal, and many cultures treat it as a ritual, and they'll pray and they'll do the whole grateful because they have to, and I really respect that. I'm totally for that. But maybe today, we're understanding that one way to elevate our consciousness is to consume less animal products. I mean, we all know, for example, that literally not consuming sustenance increases our consciousness, or at least our thoughts, aka fasting.
It's pretty, it's pretty wild.
It makes your brain more intense, and that's kind of an homage to that. And then, regarding COVID or something like that, we know that animal products, whether it's red meat or, poor dairy products in general, but they increase inflammation. And that's what you don't want. A plant-based diet will decrease inflammation. And for a lot of people, not necessarily you or I right now, because you can maintain a healthy non-vegan diet. I think you can be generally healthy. There are a lot of people who need to make that switch. I mean, we've got an obesity epidemic that nobody wants to talk about. We're actually trying to normalize that. We're trying to normalize being clinically obese.
And I don't think it's to the benefit of the people whatsoever. I think it's a marketing ploy. Above all else, it's an opportunity to make more money off insecurity, more money off of fear, more money off of people fighting over each other. Oh no, it's just fine. I can do whatever I want. And but more to agree with what you were saying, it's like, once again, like, things change. We need to adapt. And so now we do have resources. We have the intellect. We have the technology. It's time that we do start thinking about getting out of the world of scarcity and going into a world of abundance. So, and I know that's like an underlying motif in a lot of what Dr. Tuttle was saying. So that the age of abundance, it requires a massive paradigm shift in how we approach politics and economy and our communities. It's going to require a synergy of spiritualism, technology, and upon so many things. And 100% Tuttle was correct in saying that if things go the way they are, we are not creating a framework by which to accomplish these things.
No.
And so our technologies might improve, but our consciousness is not going to go anywhere. No one's life is going to get that much better. It's like...
And I thought it was a amazing point. I'm surprised. I'm amazed I hadn't thought of it yet. That we're chipping and we're surveying the animals. Yeah. We're next. We're already next. If you look at a million articles talking about nanochips, talking about vaccine passports, immunization passports, Bill Gates. Get out of here. You're telling me you don't care and you're like, yeah, I'll take it. What?
The complacency, it's
why? Because you're happy with right now is what is going on.
Too much calcification going on in that pineal, my brother.
Yeah. Pop something and take the crust off of that.
Take that crust off.
Like, take an ice pick to it.
Yeah.
It's called lysergic. Like, knock the crust off.
Yeah, that needs to happen a little bit.
But I'm trying to think. There's just so much here.
Yeah.
Definitely going to be one of my favorites so far. But and another thing, we talked about it in the last podcast with President David Lebron of Rice University. We're already seeing the newer mandates of vaccine. Obviously, you got to get vaccines for school, and I want everybody who's listening seriously to go research Robert Kennedy Jr. Listen to what he has to say about vaccines. In July, Rice disseminated a letter to the student population where they said by October 28th or something like that, every 18th, I think, actually, everybody has to have a flu vaccine if you're on campus. And I did a lot of research about the flu vaccine, and I listened to Robert Kennedy, and I went exactly to the studies that he talked about. I went to other studies, and I ended up writing Rice a letter outlining my concerns because of what happens when you get the flu vaccine. I'm not saying everybody is going to get sick. That's not my point. For example, getting the flu vaccine makes you 4 times more likely to contract a coronavirus upper respiratory illness. And by the way, coronavirus doesn't mean COVID-19. Every cold or anything like that is a coronavirus. That's why it's on the
and there's multiple wipes. Huge sources that say that, including the Pentagon.
Oh God, yeah, it's the Pentagon that's saying that. They did a study with the Pentagon personnel. I think that is actually the study that I used in that letter, linking it. And they're just testing their government employees because they wanted to see what was going on. So don't come and tell me, oh yeah, it's botched. It's like, no, I'm actually going with...
Or telling me that you're not an epidemiologist, so what
right.
do you know? It's like, well, I yeah. And that is a dangerous... That's a two-sided sword kind of situation right there.
Yeah.
Where people say, you got to be an epidemiologist, or you got to be an expert in this.
You have to be an expert.
But what happens is that is just another clever way of controlling rhetoric.
Yeah.
Because guess what? That epidemiologist had to study epidemiology like everybody else. He wasn't born some sort of saint of knowledge of diseases innately. He learned just like everybody else, and others have the capacity to learn. Others have the cranial capacity to learn.
And they do it on their own time.
And they have their own time, their own intellect, just like that epidemiologist. And the biologists that may not necessarily be like that epidemiologist locked him in a lab, they have the intellect and the time. And so to discount one because he has a piece of paper slapped on him that says he's this label or that label, what that is a subversion. What that is complacency into the bureaucratic structure. That is not an actual logical statement to say that we must only follow this bureaucratic group of people. I just don't see it that way. I think it's facetious. And so that's on that. And furthermore, if you see the deceit around you, it's not as if we're saying like we can make a huge world change.
Right.
Not necessarily that anybody has the political efficacy to right now massively change our world. But imagine if we were all a little bit informed, and it was just that much harder for the wool to be thrown over our eyes. For
the children of the lie to hypnotize you.
That's what Houston Ensemble is all about, baby.
And again, you know, that's why I don't understand when you have the people who are so liberal, so social justice, all for making things right. And it's like, you know, in one sense, you're literally the most complacent out of anybody. You think you're sticking up for some things, but you're actually driving us into the cage, like Dr. Tuttle was saying. Now, nuanced. It's very nuanced. If you want to talk about it, we'd have to go issue by issue with a lot of specifics. But we're being driven into the cage.
Yeah.
And they're actually inside the cage, and they're pulling it closed,
right.
And they're locking it from within inside.
Right.
And they'll toss the key so we can't get it.
Right.
And I'm like, hello, did I ask to be in here?
Right. Exactly.
No. Mm-hmm. Oh, you're killing. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. You might be. But see, I'm not even going to say that to you because get over it.
Yeah.
I'm heated.
There's a little term I like to use, a behavioral contradiction.
Mm-hmm.
It's like when individuals are very outspoken about a certain issue, but nothing in their day-to-day routine indicates that they are necessarily interested in what
Throw out the iPhone.
Yeah.
Throw it away.
I mean, when you have a lot to say, but your lifestyle does not reflect or support or warrant your claims and your convictions, and it starts to get to the point where it really feels as if you are saying things simply to feel better about yourself and to create a little illusion in your mind. You cause chaos around you. You don't contribute to the peace. You speak and you just signal your virtues to others. That's a world that we live in now because it's so easy to be behind a desk and say a lot of things. It is so much harder to be disciplined into an energy and to be as pure as you can and to actually contribute to growth, to positivity. It's very, very hard to do. And sometimes people need to really look into themselves very deeply to see that chaos and to acknowledge that chaos. But, man, we can go a lot into it.
Yeah, well, this has been great. This is episode 11, Dr. Will Tuttle. Yep. If you liked or loved the episode, make sure to like this video, subscribe, hit the notification bell. The Houston Ensemble is on a new path.
Mm-hmm.
We're going harder, stronger, more guests, more music, more homeless outreach. If you want to get involved with the homeless outreach, we're feeding them. We're eventually going to try and get coats and clothing and necessities for winter.
Yep.
If you want to be part of that, message us, let us know.
Yeah, there's a donate button on the top right of our website, HoustonEnsemble.com. Top right of the website. As soon as you get in, donate button boxed in white outlining. There's only a PayPal option right now, I believe. However, We're going to be looking into more organized form of accepting charities. For right now, guys, do what you can, because the contributions don't only go to the artists, okay? The contributions go to the food, to the cleaning supplies, to the gloves, to the masks, to the gas, and the research that goes into doing all this.
And I just want to add one more thing, because I just remembered it. We're actually going to be having a partnership here in Houston with Sinful Bakery, the best vegan bakery in Houston. If you haven't tried it,
really good.
Go check it out. Dylan is the owner. She's going to be donating food to us in order to pass out to people. So, we're just trying to get involved in the city and do our part in our niche. And, we're not going to fix the world, but if everybody does their part in their small piece of the world, then we can make some sort of change.
I love it. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, Houston Ensemble is signing off. We'll catch you next time. 3, 2, 1.